with this microphone only. So very welcome to our second last marine evening of the year. How did that happen? And thank you so much for being here and for supporting the work we do at the Island Conservation Trust. Just this week, I don't know if you've been to Abs this week, and we got 32 little fluffy baby penguins. From Dar Island. So it's that time of the year where the parents are molting, and at the molting they can't go into the ocean to fish, and the little ones are starved. So we had to remove them from the island. We're going to treat them at the penguin sanctuary. So it's going to be an incredibly busy Christmas and festive season as well, and a super expensive one. Just last week, Kalani came in running and he brought the bill for Wilfred to sign, and it was 21,000 rand just for the fish, because we are paying between 150 and 200 rand a box of sardines, and it's got to be a very good quality. Otherwise, they won't eat it, and it's not good for them. So it's got to be a perfect quality that we get from a specific supplier. They're very picky about it. Can't be too fatty, can't be too old. It's just got to be perfect. So between 150 and 200 rand, and just for the little ones, for the babies, the 34, we are using 6 boxes per day. So if you can get your friends together, 50 rand each, 200 rand, just go in there and say to our lovely ladies or Kalani, or whoever's working there at the moment, Mervyn, anybody would be able to help you. Just say you want to contribute to our fishy fund. Otherwise, yes, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to, I don't know, we're going to have to go find sardines ourselves. Hijack one of these boats. Has anybody got a sardine boat? We can use it. We promise we'll bring it back. So it's going to be very busy there. Oh, I did have something funny to say. Last night, Wilfred did a beautiful presentation at Overberg, BirdLife Overberg. And it was very fancy, and Hermanus and all the birders are there, and I love birders and I love watching birds, but sometimes I do mistake a hard-load gull for a kelp gull. But they are so serious. That's what I always get scared of birders, because they are so damn serious about what they do. So I had to change the computer over from the Apple Mac to our presentation, and I had to put in the HDMI cable. And while I was doing it, I said to Steve Beck, who's the MC and he's the chairperson of the Overberg Bird Club, I said, oh, you quickly got to do an interpretive dance move. And it was like, click, click, in the audience. And I was like, wow, that's not my marine evening crowd. So I appreciate being here with you. So I want to introduce you to somebody else who's also new, our newest little chick, since we've got so many chicks at the moment. We've got Elizabeth Duplessis, and she joined us about 2 months ago. She's originally from Johannesburg, but she can swim. She's also a lifesaver, very fond of the ocean. She's a qualified marine guide. She studies in Potchefstroom, was in Mossel Bay, and we took her away from Mossel Bay and said, please come and help us here. So you will see a lot of her helping us absolutely everywhere at Marine Dynamics, Island Conservation Trust, and the Penguin Sanctuary. And she's going to introduce you to our very special speaker, Stephanie Nicolaides, who's also from, well, currently in the Mossel Bay area, and that's where their paths crossed. And she told us that we have to get Stephanie to speak to us tonight. So I'm going to hand over the microphone. There was only one click. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and good luck with the microphone, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Hope it goes well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Well, it sounds good hearing my voice over the microphone. Anyway, good evening, everyone. It is a privilege for me to introduce my very good friend and inspiration, Stephanie Nicolaides. So our paths crossed for the first time at the beginning of this year, when we embarked on a journey to confront to confront some injustices taking place on our rocky shores back in Mossel Bay with harvesters and our humble oyster. So our mentor, she connected us to help bridge the gap between, can you hear me? Yeah. To bridge the gap between the local community and conservationists. So Stephanie and her passion for the ocean drove her to study oceanic health and the silent killer microplastics. So she started that for her PhD, and she started her journey with zoology, where she studied leopard tortoise personalities for her honours. For her masters, she did Cape Clawless Otter Behaviour, and as she puts it so well, she went from tortoise to otter to trash. From tortoise to otter to trash in the best of ways. In her free time, she writes blog posts for the Career Advice Centre Conservation Careers. It is now my privilege to hand over to her.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's really special to be here this evening, and I'd like to start by thanking Marine Dynamics for this opportunity to share my research work with you all. As Elizna mentioned, my work focuses on microplastic pollution along the coastline of Mossel Bay, where I'm investigating how these tiny fragments of plastic move through our beaches, seawater, and marine species, and how they connect to local livelihoods, especially the fisheries. So in this talk, I'm going to take you on a quick journey from the global story of plastics and how we got here to what's unfolding right on our own shores. We'll explore how microplastics interact with ecosystems and how they affect the species that depend on them, and how community knowledge, especially from local fishers, can help us to find practical, grounded solutions. Ultimately, this is about more than just pollution, it's about connection between science, people, and the sea. So before we dive into the science, I want to start with a simple thought for you all. Forget about the plastic straw or the plastic bags that we collect from supermarket checkout lines. Almost everything around us, from our clothes, our phones, our cars, and our homes, will all one day become waste in some form. So the question is when and what happens after? So let me ask you this. When you throw something away, where exactly is away? Does it really disappear, or is it just moving out of sight? Because everything that we use eventually finds its way back to us through water, food, and ecosystems. Our coastline extends about 3,000 kilometers, and it links us to two oceans, driving fisheries, tourism, and climate stability. And just like our land provinces, the ocean needs protection and governance. Unfortunately, our oceans are often forgotten in policy and planning, but South Africa controls an exclusive economic zone of about 1.2 million square kilometers. That's almost the same size as our land territory. So if the ocean was a province, it would be one of our largest. And I believe it's really important that we start recognizing this blue province and recognizing the economic and cultural value that it holds, and the urgent need to protect it from threats like plastic pollution. So when we say that the ocean is South Africa's 10th province, we're obviously not just talking about geography, we're talking about the people, livelihoods, and entire ways of life that depend on it. South Africa's coastline is one of the most productive marine regions in the world. The fisheries here aren't just about catching fish, they're about food on the table, jobs on the coast, and cultural traditions that have been passed down through generations. This is what makes the protection of these ecosystems not just an environmental issue, but also a deeply social one. So where did plastics make their introduction? Since the 1950s, humanity has produced about 9.2 billion tons of plastic. Think about that number for a moment. I think it's almost impossible to fully comprehend. And out of all that plastic, only about 30% is still in use today. The rest, it's turned into waste. So that adds up to a staggering 6.9 billion tons of primary plastic waste worldwide today. This graph is just a visual representation of plastic production from the 1950s through to now, and the exponential increase expected in its production through to 2050. Scientists are predicting that by the year 2050, that's 25 years away, there could be more plastic than fish in our oceans by weight. More bottles than barracuda, more plastic pieces than plankton. So the question is Do we want our oceans to be living, thriving ecosystems, or floating landfills on display for future generations? To understand what's happening in our oceans, we first need to understand how plastics became so deeply embedded in our modern world. So before plastics, the materials that we used for luxury goods all came straight from nature, and often at a terrible cost. Ivory for piano keys and billiard balls, tortoiseshell for combs and jewelry and decorative items. It was elegant, yes, but it was also brutal. Despite the barbarity of this trade, many firms at the time weren't losing sleep over the elephants or turtles that they were killing, but rather the growing shortage and the rising cost of these natural materials. That scarcity sparked innovation. So enter the chemical powerhouses of the time, DuPont, ICI, and Dow. From the 1930s through to the 1960s, they launched what the world called miracle materials: neoprene, nylon, perspex, polyethylene, Teflon, Kevlar. Why rely on elephants or turtles when you could replicate the same strength and flexibility in a lab? And for a while, plastics seemed like a savior, taking pressure off endangered species, democratizing luxury and revolutionizing manufacturing. But what began as humanity's clever solution in the 20th century has become one of its biggest crises in the 21st. So unfortunately, it was war, not peace, that truly propelled the production of plastics. During World War II, plastics were the miracle material that nobody knew that they needed. Nylon, which first showed up as stockings in 1939, was suddenly ripped off shelves and turned into parachutes, ropes, and tents. PVC was used in insulating military wiring. Polyethylene was used in radar insulation, and plexiglass was used to replace glass in aeroplanes so that they didn't shatter mid-flight. And by the time peace arrived, all the factories were humming. The technology was there, and the industries thought, why stop? So plastics moved from the battlefields into our households. And in the shiny optimism of the 1950s and 60s, plastics were marketed as the future: cheap, colorful, disposable, and oh so modern. The result is that production of plastic doubled nearly every decade after the 1960s, and ads like these painted plastics as liberation, the best thing since women got the vote. It kept food fresher for longer, cleaner, and just made life a whole lot easier and more convenient. Disposability was marketed as optimism. So while the world celebrated convenience, little thought was given to the long-term environmental costs of plastic. That mindset has shaped global attitudes, and today we face the challenge of shifting those perceptions from plastic as progress to plastic as a problem that demands our urgent change. I think it's safe to say that plastics dominate every sector of our lives, from the plastic wrap around our fruit to the bottles holding our drinks. Packaging is one of the biggest users of plastic. And if we step into our closets, polyester, nylon, and acrylic are all plastic-derived materials. So do you know that these clothing items shed millions of microplastic particles into the water every time we do a load of laundry? It's scary because it's invisible. We don't see the fibers in our tap water, the fragments in the air that we breathe, or the chemicals leaching from the packaging that we eat. It's safe to say that plastics are everywhere, in our hospitals, homes, phones, and even ships that move us across the world. They've made life easier, safer, but at a cost. So the very material that we depend on is now the one suffocating our planet. If we look at the beauty industry for a minute, and the ugly side behind it, many face scrubs, toothpastes, and glittery makeup products contain microplastic particles. We rub them on, wash them off, and they flow straight into the ocean. Just one bottle of exfoliating face wash can contain up to 350,000 microbeads. So the tiny grains that you see here aren't sugar or salt, they're plastic. So think about it. How much plastic is sitting in our bathroom cabinets right now? And while plastics touch every sector of our lives, not all plastics are equal. Some are vital, and others are disposable and persistent. When we talk about plastic, we're talking about polymers. What are polymers? Polymers are long chains of repeating chemical units, kind of like Lego blocks that are snapped together. So we change the blocks and how they're connected, and you get a completely different type of plastic with different properties. So while we often categorize plastics into 7 main categories, there are actually over 3,000 different types of polymers in circulation today. Each one of these breaks down in the environment in a different way and creates a massive cocktail of pollutants. And what happens once these plastics enter the environment? They don't just disappear. Over time, sunlight, wind, rain, and waves break them down into smaller and smaller fragments. Plastic pollution exists across a whole spectrum of sizes. We get megaplastics, so if we think about fishing nets that trap whales and turtles. Macroplastics, like bottles, bags, and crates, are what we visibly see in our environment. Mesoplastics are smaller fragments that come from larger pieces breaking apart. And as these plastics continue to break down in the environment, they reach scales that we can't even see. This is where we get microplastics, which are defined as anything smaller than 5 millimeters, and nanoplastics, which are invisible to the naked eye. So here's what that looks like on a visual scale. Microplastics range in size from 1 micron to 5 millimeters. So that's everything from the size of a grain of sand to something that you can barely see under a microscope. And nanoplastics, which are even smaller, less than 1 micron. So that's smaller than bacteria and even smaller than some viruses in size. So we're talking about particles tiny enough to move through ecosystems and potentially even through our own body cells. So microplastics fall into 2 categories. We have primary and secondary microplastics. Primary microplastics are manufactured small on purpose. So if we think about microbeads in our face scrubs or nurdles from factories or fibers from our clothes, they enter the ocean through wastewater or industrial loss. Whereas secondary microplastics are created when bigger plastics like bottles and bags and fishing gear break down through sunlight, waves, and weathering. These secondary particles are the most common type that we find in the environment today. So whether they start small or break down over time, both types eventually end up where they shouldn't. So it's important to understand this distinction between primary and secondary microplastics. Primary sources can obviously be managed at the production and regulatory level, but secondary microplastics reflect systemic issues like our waste management practices, its persistence in the environment, and its degradation pathways. So every piece of plastic that has ever been made is still somewhere on the planet, and much of it eventually finds its way to the ocean. Plastics reach the ocean through countless routes. It's washed down from rivers, leaks from landfills, or runs off farms. Even at sea, lost fishing gear and shipping waste add to the problem. And once it's there, it spreads through currents, it sinks into the ocean sediment, and it's often eaten by marine life, creating chemicals and toxins along the way. So what starts on land doesn't stay there, it travels through the food web all the way back to us. I've got a question for you all. How long do we think it actually takes for a plastic bottle to break down in the ocean? 10 years? 50 years? The answer is closer to 450 years. A fishing line? Try 600 years. A simple grocery bag can linger for 20 years, and styrofoam cups that we throw away without a single thought will remain here for half a century. So the plastic that we use for minutes today will outlive not only us, but generations to come. So the question is, are we okay with leaving behind that kind of legacy? Now that we understand how microplastics behave and transform in the environment, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. This map shows the global research landscape on microplastics over the last decade. Each red dot on this map represents a study site where beach sediment samples were collected and analysed for microplastics between 2010 and 2020. So we can notice dense clusters in the Northern Hemisphere, across Europe, North America and parts of Asia, but vast areas, especially in Africa and the Southern Hemisphere, remain largely blank. So this map tells us two stories. Firstly, that microplastics are a global issue, and secondly, that we still have huge knowledge gaps in regions most vulnerable to pollution, like our own coastlines here in South Africa. The African continent produces about 17 million tons of plastic waste each year, and most of this, unfortunately, is often mismanaged. Without strong recycling systems, much of that ends up in rivers and oceans, especially in coastal nations, and as our cities continue to grow, so does our waste problem. The truth is, this isn't just a pollution issue, it's a systems issue. If we don't rethink how we manage our plastic waste now, the tide of plastic will only rise faster. If we bring things closer to home, South Africa, we've produced around 46 studies on microplastics so far. That is a solid start, but it's still just fragments of a much bigger picture. Many of these studies have used different research methods, so it's hard to compare results or to see trends. We also know very little about microplastics on land, in the air, or in key species in our country. So what we need is consistency in our research, standardized approaches that connects our data and tells us the full story. Until then, our national picture remains blurred. We know microplastics are here, but not how deep the problem truly runs. Plastics are not villains, at least not all of them. Some are obviously essential in medical equipment, in solar panels, car parts that cut emissions. They've made our lives safer, lighter and more efficient. But single-use plastics, straws, bags or wrappers that we use for minutes are the real problem. They last for centuries, choking our rivers and oceans. The solution, in my opinion, isn't to ban all plastics, but to rethink how we use them. We need to phase out the unnecessary, manage the essential, and choose smarter alternatives. So how many plastics in our daily lives are truly necessary? If we shift from plastics to people for a moment, to the industries whose livelihoods depend on the ocean, when we talk about South Africa's fisheries, we're talking about big business. The Oceana Group, for example, runs over 50 vessels and 8 processing plants. Sea Harvest dominates hake, while Premier Fishing, Blue Seas and Atlantis Foods all expand across squid, tuna and lobster and the pelagics. So together these companies form the backbone of South Africa's seafood economy. But with that scale comes pressure. Pressure on ecosystems, on our fish stocks, and on the sustainability of the ocean that sustains us. So with great power comes great pressure, and South Africa's fisheries are feeling it. Depleted stocks have risen from 9 in 2020 to 13 in 2023, and 70% of our commercial line fish are now considered collapsed, with some species below 10% of past levels. So even as quotas tighten, illegal and unreported fishing continues to strip the ocean unseen. If we add to that the growing layer of plastic pollution, choking habitats and food chains, and our marine systems, we are battling on two fronts: overexploitation and pollution and contamination. So here's an indication of what the data is showing. Sardines, once abundant in our waters, have plummeted since the early 2000s, taking with them the predictability of the famous sardine run. Anchovies have held up better, but 2023 saw a sharp drop that's raising alarms. These small pelagic fish form the foundation of our marine food web, and when they falter, everything above them feels the ripple. And just as overfishing erodes our stocks, plastic pollution adds another invisible stressor to an already fragile system. Beyond these big commercial fleets, there's another powerful force that shapes our coasts. South Africa has around 1.2 million recreational fishermen. For many, it's more than just a hobby. It's heritage, a way to connect with the sea and support local economies. But even small-scale activities like these leave a footprint. Lost lines, hooks and nets often end up as marine litter, adding to the growing plastic load in our oceans. That's why initiatives like the Responsible Angler matter, encouraging our recreational fishermen to protect the very waters that sustain their passion. Because even when the fishing stops, the gear doesn't. Lost or discarded nets, lines and traps are known as ghost gear. They keep fishing endlessly beneath the surface. Every year, around 640,000 tons of this gear enters our oceans, making up nearly half of all microplastic pollution by weight. And as they break down, they become yet another source of microplastics, invisible, persistent, and woven through the entire marine food web. As these particles break down and they fragment, these microplastics enter the food web itself. From plankton to predators, these particles have been found in key South African species: mussels, sardines, anchovies and hake, the same species that fill our markets and our plates. So the threat isn't just to marine life, it's woven into our culture, our economy, and ultimately our own food security. So the problem with microplastic contamination isn't just physical harm, like gut blockages or reduced feeding efficiency in the species that ingest the particles. Plastics also act like toxic sponges. They carry harmful chemicals into marine organisms. And of course, these organisms don't just stay in the ocean. They move up the food web through the food that we consume, which means that microplastics aren't just a marine issue, they're a food security and a human health issue too. Microplastics add another layer of stress that we're only beginning to fully understand. So this is where my research comes in, right here in Mossel Bay, one of South Africa's most active and ecologically important coastal hubs. My research is focusing on microplastic pollution along the coastline. Mossel Bay is a semi-enclosed bay, which means that pollutants tend to accumulate rather than disperse. So if we add to that fishing, tourism, and shipping activity in the area, we've got the perfect area to study how human pressures interact with the marine environment. So for my research, I'm taking an integrated approach, combining natural and social sciences. On the physical side, I'm analyzing beaches, seawater for microplastics, and key marine species to understand how these particles are moving through the food web. But numbers alone don't tell the full story, so my research also involves interviews with local and recreational fishermen to capture their ecological knowledge. The goal is to bridge science and community. By combining these threads, data and lived experience, we can begin to build a clearer, more human-centered picture of how plastic pollution impacts both ecosystems and livelihoods. So the methodological approach that I'm taking is multi-layered. On beaches, I employ quadrats and transects to collect sediment or beach sand systematically to capture both horizontal and vertical distribution of microplastic particles. In seawater, I have been filtering 1 and 20 litre-sized volumes at multiple points along the Mossel Bay coastline. And we sample at low tide, high tide, and the rack line to capture how particles are moving up and down in the system. Low tide gives us an indication of long-term buildup. The high tide line will show us daily deposits, and the rack line is a hotspot where debris collects. So together these techniques give us a clearer picture of how microplastics are moving through the system, where are they settling, and how are they interacting with the coastal environment. So to identify and track microplastics, we separate them from sand and seawater in the lab using density separation, Plastics are obviously lightweight and buoyant, so they float. And when we filter the samples, we remove organic matter with potassium hydroxide to leave behind only the plastic particles. This lets us see how particles are moving between sand, surf, and sea. For my biotic or animal sampling, I have focused on 5 key species, each playing a unique role in the coastal ecosystem. We have barnacles. These cling to rocks in the intertidal zone and are great indicators of what's happening right at the shoreline. Brown mussels are natural filter feeders, constantly sieving the water and capturing whatever's suspended, including microplastics. Plow snails move across our sandy beaches, and they give us insight into more dynamic, wave-driven environments. Then there are sardines, small pelagic fish that link lower and higher trophic levels. So what the sardines eat tells us what's flowing through the food web. And finally, shallow water hake, a commercially important species in our country. These show us how far these particles can travel up the food chain. So together these 5 give a connected picture from shore to sea, from filter feeders to top predators, of how microplastics are moving through and impacting marine life right in the Southern Cape. So all the animal samples that I analyze undergo rigorous laboratory analysis. For my fish species, I analyze certain organs which get digested and filtered. We want to remove all the biological and organic tissue. So we do this with the aid of potassium hydroxide, and this allows us to isolate any ingested microplastic particles. But how do we identify and quantify microplastic contamination? So following all the collection, we zoom in under the microscope, where every tiny piece tells us a story. So we start with the basics. We document the size and shape and color of the particles. Is it a fiber? Is it a fragment? Is it film? And these clues help us to trace back its possible point of origin. But visual sight alone can be deceiving, because not everything that looks like plastic actually is. So this is where advanced technology comes into play. FTI spectroscopy steps in. So you can think of this like a molecular fingerprint scanner. So it shines an infrared light through the particle, revealing its unique chemical signature. And this allows us to confirm whether or not we've identified polyethylene or polyester or PVC, and it gives us confidence beyond the naked eye. So once we've identified and confirmed what these particles are, from the tiniest fibers, we can start asking a much bigger question of where are they coming from and who and what is being affected. And behind each and every data point and microscope image, there are people and coastal communities living alongside these ecosystems. And that brings me to the fishes. They are often seen as part of the problem, but in the truth, they are also part of the solution. Many have spent their lives reading the tides, watching species shift, and noticing changes in the marine environment long before scientists do. Yes, lost fishing gear contributes to marine litter, but blame doesn't fix the problem. Collaboration does. So by listening to their knowledge and working together, we can bridge science and community, turning those who depend on the sea into its strongest defenders. Fishes, recreational, commercial, and subsistence, can be defined as the eyes and ears of the ocean. They see what most of us never do. They notice when the water feels different, when the catches change, when a species stops showing up where it used to. That's local ecological knowledge, living, breathing science that comes from experience. So by bringing their voices into research, we don't just study the ocean, we listen to it through those who know it best. I'm currently interviewing recreational fishermen to learn how they see plastic pollution affect the coast, their catches and the communities over time. So if any of you are recreational fishermen or know someone who does, and you'd be interested in contributing your voice and experiences to the study, please do come and chat with me after the talk. I'd love to include your perspectives to help us build a more complete picture of what's happening on our coasts. So, rethinking plastic policy in South Africa. As a nation, South Africa has taken steps in its policy reform, but small steps won't turn the tide. It's time for us to think bigger, to ban what we don't need, to redesign what we do, and to hold producers accountable for the plastic that they create, to make waste through circular systems that return, reuse, and reimagine plastic. Because like I've said before, plastic is not the enemy, our mindset is. So when we start seeing plastic as a resource, not rubbish, that's when real change begins. So the goal we should strive to achieve as a nation is simple: to keep plastic in use, out of our environment and out of the sea. Because this true shift isn't technological, it's cultural. It begins when we stop throwing things away and start realizing that there is no away. Together we can turn invisible plastics into visible change and ensure that our oceans and the people who depend on them continue to thrive for generations to come. Every piece of plastic in the ocean began as a decision on land, a choice made by someone, somewhere. The good news is that means the solution also starts with us. From the coffee cup we reuse, to the line that we reel in, to the companies that we support, each small act adds up. Whether we're researchers, fishermen, teachers, or parents, we all share the same ocean. And by making mindful choices every day, we can shift from being part of the problem to becoming part of the solution. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Phantom of the Opera.
Yes, please go for it.
Two questions. One, so obviously the work you're doing is going to be vital for how we see going forward with this problem in the future. But what currently is the world doing as a collective? I mean, obviously all of us can be conscientious about this. We can check our own single-use plastics. And then, yes, Hansby would be a clean community. But
Yes.
as you said, all of the trash that's currently in existence
Yes.
is still already a very big problem. I've spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and it's just plastic upon plastic upon plastic upon plastic, and that's also not going anywhere. Is there like something that the whole world is planning to do, or is that still basically going to happen in the future?
Unfortunately, at the UN recently, they were trying to sign a global plastic pact with all the nations of the world to come to a agreement, yes, on how we manage and how we use and process plastic. But the talks fell through, so countries struggled to come to agreement in how we define plastic and how nations are going to process and manage this resource. So unfortunately, from a global point of view, we can't reach consensus with the nations of our planet. But I think it starts local communities, as you've said here, where everyone's action has a ripple effect that hopefully will lead up the chain and make a bigger impact.
Yeah, cool. One more question.
Yes.
What was your favorite encounter with otters?
With otters, oh my goodness. So my research with otters was based in KwaZulu-Natal, and I did a lot of research on a fish farm there. So I got to see the otters feasting on the tilapia ponds quite ferociously. It was like a restaurant for them, coming in and just scent marking, and that was really awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Thinking these worm eyes.
Steph.
I saw it when Donald Trump, when he was like, oh, no more
Yes.
reusable straws.
Yes.
I hate those things.
Mhm.
No, done.
Yes.
And he just signed it all.
Yep.
It was a joke. It was like a meme.
Yeah.
But it was real. So,
Unfortunately.
no, it starts with us. We're not going to wait for government or anybody else to change. Yes.
Just to continue with that thought, I noticed from your map
Yes.
that the Americas, the eastern seaboard,
Yes.
had no reporting stations, and the same followed for Australian southern seaboard. Is there a reason in terms of reporting for that, or is it a lack of interest?
I believe that's largely lack of, not interest per se, but I think a lot of the problem comes in with funding for research, especially trying to propel institutions to acknowledge that microplastic pollution research is important. And so I think there are a lot of countries on the planet that are still in need of mapping and documenting baseline data for microplastic accumulation. So there's still a lot of work to be done. As you saw on the map, I mean, a lot of regions on our planet and our continent are still under-researched. So there's a lot of room for research to take place, yeah, to quantify the problem.
Any more questions? Stephanie, that
Thank
was
you.
incredible. Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
So much. Okay, hold on. Yes, this is basically, well, I wanted to say, our new president.
Oh, that was so inspiring because it just makes me even more passionate about what we need to be doing here. My question would be, I don't know if it's a question, sorry, I just had to get it off my chest. I was just, there's so much, it's so overwhelming. This plastic thing is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And realistically, what can you really do as one person? I know how we all feel about it, but maybe if we just start ignoring, for me anyway, sorry, this is very personal, but start ignoring all the, because it's very financial based, very political based. We know the facts. It's not beating around the bush. We all understand what's actually happening in the whole globe. Is maybe if we here in Hansby, this is our town.
Yeah.
If we just all made a difference in our world, which is Hansby, maybe, firstly, we would have a better world that we live in. And secondly, most importantly, maybe it would have a ripple effect. Maybe somebody else would hear about it. We do have things these days like social media and all those platforms. And maybe there would be some positive ripple effect. So for me, realistically, I thought if we just each did our little bit here in Hansby, if that's the way we go onto the global map, wow, I would be ecstatic. That would be amazing.
Precisely.
A positive effect on the globe. And most importantly, in our protected marine life right here that we are personally responsible for. So, and we can each, we're a small town.
Exactly.
And each one of us here, if we all did our little bits, we could actually make a massive difference.
Exactly.
And how awesome would that be? So that's a realistic dream. Sorry, and the question that wasn't, sorry, I just...
No, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, sorry, I had to get that off.
Thank you very much. So yes, I think we're all feeling
There's
like
another
there's
question at
nothing
the
we can do. But like Patricia said, here's our deputy president. No, sorry, I'm sitting at the back and I should just shut up because people who know me know I can't shut up. Okay? I'm nearly as bad as Wilfred, so no offense, Wilfred. But obviously Sustainable Seas Trust has done a huge amount of work with the African Marine Waste Network, in case people don't know about that, and they've also put out a big report. So there is a lot of work that they're doing across Africa. I mean, we've been very localized. But I just want to support what you say, because I happen to walk every day. Some of you see me walking my dogs. I am the crazy dog walking lady. But because I walk, I see more. Okay? I'm walking in the fire break. I'm seeing horrific stuff that's happening since the trash pickers are in the loop here now. It's because they are taking the bags into the green belt and they are distributing it in there. So I have been talking to Chess about trying to arrange a big cleanup. Again, I'm working very hard, so I've got to try and figure that a day to do that. And I will be inviting and putting it on a group and inviting people to join me. So there's that problem. But I walk on the streets, guys, and so I really just want to challenge. I know a lot of you are doing I see you there. I watch who's picking up trash. And there's a lot of people who think it's not their responsibility because, it's dirty or whatever. Listen, I take gloves, I do the hard work, and I don't care because as that meme goes, it's my planet. And I'm actually doing it for the nature around me because, not even for you guys when I pick up the trash. I'm doing it for the nature that we still are privileged enough to have here. So sorry I'm challenging, but I walk down the streets, guys, and I do not see people walking out of their homes. Right opposite, there's trash lying there. And the stuff that is being dumped is on a whole nother level. So I just want to challenge, just step outside your own house and see what's on the verge. And please pick it up. Because, I've been picking up for years and years when I'm walking dogs. It is exhausting. And I just think if everybody stepped out their house and funds by exactly what you were saying, we would have the cleanest. And it is about pride. And really, I really think we are capable. I really know there's a lot of passionate people in this room. So I'm sorry I couldn't shut up, but I had to challenge everybody to that tonight. Okay, I'm going now. Hey, Greg, yes, as you can see, we're very passionate about it. Like Patricia also said, we've got an incredible recycling plant, and we know that the first thing is not to recycle,
Yes.
it's to reduce,
Yes,
reuse,
exactly.
recycle. So that's only the third option. But like Brenda is also saying, don't let there be glass bottles in your garbage and plastic bottles that should be recycled. Yes.
There's a lot of good research being done along our coasts, and one of the things that I don't see being reported on, and I'm not sure whether it's a lack of research, lack of funding, is the entry of microplastics into the digestive systems of fish and the controls that it introduces into the reproduction cycles. Is it affecting the reproduction cycles in terms of bringing down the bulk of the fish, or is it purely to do with overfishing?
He's actually a local geologist, but he's also an expert about reproduction of fish.
So in South Africa, I know the research landscape, we are still obviously quite behind the global arena. But when it comes to assessing things like the impacts of microplastics on fish and reproductive cycles and reproductive health of the organism, that we are still just quantifying the abundance and concentrations of microplastics. We haven't really ventured into the impacts of these particles yet on the health of the organisms. So that's, that still needs to be done.
Okay, I think because Stephanie is staying over here tonight, so you've got many hours to discuss with her. Yes.
The whole problem to me seems biodegradability, the time. And this is a man-made product. Now what research and what is happening in the technical side to reduce that biodegradability to, let's say, a year or two for a plastic bag? Is there such hope?
Well, what about that 9 billion tons that's already there?
So with biodegradability of plastic, I think that a lot of companies unfortunately use greenwashing as a tactic to think that we are using something sustainable and eco-friendly. But research into the biodegradability of plastic products is also still very new, and a lot of work needs to be done on that. But the research that has been done actually indicates that products that purport to be biodegradable, like biodegradable straws, are, in fact, there's certain environmental conditions that particle needs to meet in order for it to actually break down in the way that they say it does. So a plastic straw that enters the environment that is supposedly biodegradable does not degrade in the way that the company purports it to. It takes certain environmental conditions and factors for it to degrade in a specific time. So there's still a lot of research that needs to be done on improving and facilitating the breakdown of these particles and making something truly eco-friendly and biodegradable in a sense where it doesn't fragment into smaller particles that still persist in the environment.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Elisa, you've got a little something to give. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Good luck for the rest of your
Thank
studies.
you.
I know
Thank you
you
for the
know where we
opportunity.
are,
Thank
so
you.
please come and visit again.
Thank you for the opportunity, everybody. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.